The first night it happened, there was no reason for me to be afraid. That's the part that still bothers me when I think back on it. Nothing was wrong in any obvious way. I wasn't watching anything disturbing. I wasn't tired enough to be drifting in and out of sleep. I wasn't even anxious. I was just sitting on my bed with my back against the wall, phone glowing softly in my hands, scrolling through nothing in particular. The house was quiet, but not unusually so. The kind of quiet you only notice later, once you realize how wrong it felt. At the time, it was just background silence. Comfortable, familiar. Then my thumb stopped moving. I didn't consciously decide to stop scrolling. My body just froze. My breathing slowed without me telling it to. Not panicked, not rushed. Just careful. Like my body was trying not to make noise. I remember becoming suddenly aware of everything around me. The faint hum of electricity inside the walls, the distant sound of a car passing somewhere down the street, the soft ringing in my ears that comes when a room is too quiet for too long. That's when the feeling settled in, that certainty. The kind you don't question. Someone was watching me, not from outside the house, not from a window. This felt closer than that. This felt like the presence was already where it wanted to be. Inside. Close enough that it didn't need to move. I kept my eyes on my phone longer than I should have, afraid that if I looked up, I'd confirm something I couldn't undo. I told myself I was imagining it, that everyone gets that feeling sometimes, that it would go away if I ignored it. It didn't. When I finally lifted my gaze, my bedroom door was open exactly the way I always left it, just wide enough to see into the hallway. The hallway light was off. At first, I saw nothing, just darkness layered on darkness, the edges of the doorway blending into the shadows beyond it. Then my eyes adjusted. Something shifted. A shape began to separate itself from the darkness, not moving, just becoming clearer. Like it had been there the entire time, waiting for me to notice. A person, pressed flat against the edge of the doorframe, body hidden behind the wall, revealing only what they wanted me to see. A shoulder, the faint outline of a head, and then I saw the eye. One eye wide open and unblinking, catching just enough light to reflect back at me. There was no confusion in it. No surprise. It wasn't the look of someone who had been caught. It was the look of someone who had been waiting. My heart began to pound so hard I felt it in my throat. My chest tightened. I tried to swallow, but my mouth had gone dry. I don't remember blinking. I don't remember breathing normally. All I remember is that eye fixed on me, calm and patient. The silence stretched unbearably long. I waited for it to move, to blink, to pull back, to do anything that would prove this was real, and not my mind playing tricks on me. Instead, the corner of the mouth slowly came into view, and it smiled. Not a wide grin, not exaggerated. Just enough of a smile to let me know they were enjoying this. Enjoying the fact that I was frozen, that I didn't know what to do. I let out a sharp gasp without meaning to. The face vanished instantly, not quickly, not in a panic. It simply withdrew, smooth and controlled, disappearing behind the wall like it had never been there at all. I jumped off the bed and slammed my door shut so hard, the frame rattled. I locked it, then checked it again, then checked it a third time because my hands were shaking too badly to trust myself. I slid down to the floor and pressed my back against the door, knees pulled to my chest, listening. I expected footsteps. I expected the sound of someone running away, or trying to handle, or laughing. There was nothing, just silence. Minutes passed, then longer. My legs went numb from sitting on the floor, but I didn't move. Every small sound made my heart jump. The house felt different now, like it was holding its breath. Eventually, I forced myself to stand. I opened the door slowly, half expecting that face to be right there again, closer this time. The hallway was empty. I turned on every light in the house. The brightness felt wrong, too harsh, but I needed to see. I checked every room, every corner, every closet. I checked under beds, even though I knew how ridiculous that was. Everything was locked. Everything looked normal. I laughed quietly to myself, the sound shaky and forced. I told myself I had imagined it. That stress does strange things. That the brain fills in shapes when it's bored. I was almost convinced. Then I noticed the hallway light. It was on. I stood there staring at it, my stomach slowly dropping. I knew I hadn't turned it on, which meant whoever had been watching me hadn't been hiding in the dark. They had been standing in the light the entire time, choosing how much of themselves I was allowed to see, and that meant they knew exactly where I was. Living alone teaches you patterns. At first, they're comforting. You don't even notice them forming. You just fall into them naturally, repeating the same small actions every night because they make the space feel predictable, safe, familiar. Mine were exact. At 9:45 every night, I locked the front door. I didn't rush it. I turned the deadbolt slowly and checked the handle twice. At 10 o'clock, I made tea. Same mug, same kettle. At 10:30, I sat down on the couch, turned on the lamp in the corner, and put on the same show I'd been watching for weeks. Same volume, same seat cushion. I didn't think anyone else noticed. The first sign that something was wrong was so small I almost missed it. One night I came home and found the chair at my kitchen table pulled out slightly, just a few inches. I remember standing there staring at it, trying to remember if I'd done that before leaving. I decided I must have. Another night, a cabinet door was open, just barely. I closed it and laughed at myself for being paranoid. Living alone messes with your head, I told myself. Then my TV volume was one number lower than I remembered. That bothered me more than it should have. Still, I blamed myself. I always did. It wasn't until the night I came home early that the excuses stopped working. I'd left work sooner than usual and pulled into my driveway almost an hour ahead of schedule. When I walked up to my front door and turned the knob, it opened. Unlocked. I stood there with my keys still in my hand, staring at the door. My heart started racing immediately. I knew I locked it. I always locked it. I listened. The house was silent. No movement, no voices, no footsteps. I told myself maybe I'd rushed that morning. Maybe I'd been distracted. I stepped inside slowly, checking each room with the lights on. Everything looked normal. Nothing was missing. Nothing looked disturbed. That night, I sat on the couch earlier than usual. The lamp was off. The house felt wrong, but I couldn't explain why. At 10:12, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message was short. "You're early tonight." My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen, waiting for a second message that would explain it away. A wrong number, a joke, something. Nothing came. I typed back, asking who it was. The response came instantly. "You usually sit down at 10:30. My hands went cold. I looked around the room, suddenly aware of how exposed I felt sitting there. That's when I noticed the lamp in the corner was already on. I hadn't turned it on yet. Another message appeared. "You forgot the tea." My throat tightened. I hadn't told anyone about my routine. No one visited, no one came over. No one should have known those details. I typed again, demanding to know how they knew this. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Behind me, the couch creaked. Not the sound of old springs settling, not the house shifting. Weight, carefully shifting weight. My phone buzzed again. Don't turn around. I sat completely still. My breathing became shallow. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. I stared straight ahead at the dark TV screen, too afraid to see my reflection. The presence behind me felt close, close enough that I imagined I could feel warmth. Another message. I didn't mean for you to come home early. The couch dipped slightly. I didn't scream, I didn't move. I just sat there, realizing the routines I thought kept me safe had actually taught someone else exactly where I'd be, exactly when I'd be there, and exactly how alone I was. People always say silence is the scariest sound. They're wrong. Breathing is worse. I was lying on my couch with the lights off, rain tapping steadily against the windows, the sound soft enough to blur my thoughts into something distant and unfocused. I wasn't asleep, but I wasn't fully awake either. That heavy, drifting state where time stretches and your body feels heavier than it should. The house felt calm, familiar, safe. That's why it took me a few seconds to realize something wasn't right. I heard an inhale, slow, measured, careful. At first, I assumed it was my own breathing. When you're half asleep, sounds blend together. Your mind fills in gaps. I held my breath to prove it to myself. The breathing continued. It didn't match my rhythm. It came again, a long inhale followed by an uneven exhale, like whoever was breathing was trying not to make noise but failing slightly. There was a wetness to it, a closeness that made my skin prickle. My eyes opened fully. I stayed perfectly still, staring into the darkness of the living room. The rain outside suddenly sounded louder, more distant at the same time, like it was separating me from the rest of the world. The breathing was close, not across the room, not down the hallway, inside the room with me. My heart started pounding so hard, I was sure it could be heard. I tried to slow it down, tried to convince myself that panic would only make things worse. I listened carefully, straining to figure out where the sound was coming from. The breathing shifted. Not quickly, not obviously. It moved just enough for me to realize it wasn't stationary. Whoever it belonged to was repositioning themselves, slowly, deliberately, like they were testing how much they could move without being noticed. I reached for my phone, careful not to let the couch creak. My hands were shaking badly, fingers clumsy as I turned on the flashlight. The beam snapped on, cutting a narrow cone of light through the darkness. Nothing. The couch, the coffee table, the doorway, empty. The breathing didn't stop. It followed me when I stood up. I felt it rather than heard it at first. That sense of being tracked. I took one step, then another, my bare feet cold against the floor. With every step toward the hallway, the breathing became clearer, heavier, closer. By the time I reached the hallway entrance, I could hear details I wished I couldn't. The faint hitch before each inhale, the way the exhale lingered, like whoever it was enjoyed drawing it out. The sound led me to the laundry room. I stood outside the door for a long time, my hand hovering near the handle. Everything in me screamed not to open it, that nothing good could come from confirming what I already knew. I opened it anyway. The breathing stopped instantly. The silence that replaced it felt thick, oppressive, like the air itself had changed. I flicked the light on, my eyes scanning every corner of the room. The washer, the dryer, the shelves, empty. Then I noticed the closet. The door was cracked open slightly, a thin slice of darkness inside. The gap was small, but it felt intentional, like it had been left that way on purpose. I stared at it, my chest tight. Something shifted inside the closet. Not a step, not a movement I could identify. Just a subtle change in presence, like the air inside had compressed. Then a whisper came from the darkness. "I know you hear me." The voice was calm, almost gentle. It wasn't threatening, and that somehow made it worse. My legs weakened. I stumbled back, the flashlight beam shaking violently as my grip loosened. "You weren't supposed to wake up," the voice continued softly. "You usually sleep through the rain." My stomach dropped. They knew my habits. The closet door pressed outward slightly, just enough to make the hinges creak. "I've been here before," the voice said. "You never noticed." The light flickered, just once, but it was enough. I backed away slowly, heart racing, every instinct screaming at me to run. The breathing started again, louder now, no longer trying to hide. I turned and ran. I didn't grab my keys. I didn't put on shoes. I burst out the front door into the rain, lungs burning, feet slapping against wet concrete. I didn't stop until I reached my car, hands shaking as I locked the doors and crouched inside. I stayed there until morning. When I finally worked up the courage to go back inside, everything looked normal. The laundry room, the closet, the lights, all exactly the way they should have been, except for one thing. The couch cushion where I'd been lying was indented, not from me, from someone sitting there long enough to leave a mark. Even now, lying awake at night, I sometimes hear that breathing again, slow, patient, like whoever it belonged to knows exactly where I sleep and is waiting for me not to wake up next time. I've always been careful about locks. Not obsessive, just consistent. It was one of those habits you build when you live alone long enough. Every night before bed, I checked the front door, then the back door, then the windows. Sometimes twice, just to quiet that small voice in the back of my head. That night, I checked everything 3 times. I remember laughing softly at myself when I finished, standing in the hallway with all the lights on, feeling a little embarrassed for being so paranoid. Nothing had happened. Nothing ever happened. I told myself I was just tired. I went into my bedroom, shut the door, and locked it. That detail matters. I put on my headphones and played rain sounds. Steady, heavy rain that drowned out the house noises and helped me relax. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling as the sound washed over me. Slowly, my body started to sink into the mattress. I must have drifted off because the next thing I remember was silence. Not gradual silence. Instant. The rain cut off so abruptly it startled me awake. I pulled one headphone off my ear, confused, and that's when I heard it. A voice inside my room. "Why did you lock the door?" My heart slammed so hard it felt like it knocked the air out of my lungs. I ripped the headphones off completely and sat up, my eyes snapping toward the sound. My bedroom door was open. It hadn't been opened before. The hallway light was off, leaving the doorway framed in darkness. I stared at it, my mind scrambling to make sense of what I was seeing. I knew I had locked that door. I remembered the click of the lock, the slight resistance when I tested the handle. I hadn't imagined that. "Hello?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. No answer. Then the voice spoke again, closer this time. I was already inside. Every muscle in my body went rigid. I felt cold all over, like my blood had drained away. I slid off the bed slowly. backing toward the window, my eyes never leaving the open doorway. The voice wasn't threatening. That was the worst part. It sounded calm, almost conversational, like someone explaining something obvious. "You always lock it," the voice continued. "You did tonight, too." My stomach twisted. They knew my habits, knew my routine, knew me well enough to comment on it. I swallowed hard. "Who are you?" There was a pause, then a soft chuckle. "I don't think you'd recognize me," the voice said. "You've never really looked." The light inside my closet flicked on. I froze. The closet door was open, just a crack, the warm yellow light spilling out onto the carpet. I hadn't turned that light on. I hadn't opened that door. "I didn't mean to wake you," the voice said gently. "You sleep deeper with the rain." My chest felt tight, every breath shallow and painful. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears, drowning out everything else. The closet door shifted slightly, not opening fully, just moving enough to let me know someone was behind it. "I sit there sometimes," the voice continued, "right there, when you're asleep." I shook my head, backing farther toward the window. "Stop," I whispered, though I didn't know what I was asking them to stop doing. The voice sighed like I'd disappointed them. "You're not supposed to notice," they said. "That's when things get complicated." The closet door creaked open another inch. I ran. I threw myself toward the window, yanking it open with shaking hands. Cold air rushed in. I didn't care how high it was or how badly I might get hurt. I climbed out and dropped into the wet grass below, pain shooting up my legs. I didn't look back. I ran barefoot through the yard, through the rain, until I reached the street. I didn't stop running until I reached a neighbor's house and pounded on the door until someone answered. The police came later. They searched my house top to bottom. Closets, attic, crawl space. They found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, no evidence anyone had been there. Except for one thing. My bedroom door. The lock was broken from the inside. Even now, months later, I still lock my doors. But sometimes, when the rain stops suddenly in the middle of the night, I lie awake staring at my closet, wondering if the reason nothing was taken is because they never planned on leaving.